this desire that I believe we all have to belong, to be part of something that's
Yes.
greater than ourselves.
But I just want to say thank you, for really getting on this podcast and this interview because your work is really cool and really awesome. And on
Thank
top
you.
of that, you also help vulnerable communities, and that mission and that purpose really speaks to me. I love how you do that because seeing even your saving face photo series, it's actually even relative to now with face
Very
masks.
relative, yeah.
And so seeing that, I realized how funny how Asia, that is a norm. That is
Hmm.
something that you do as a citizen in order to stop the spread of disease. Yet in the West, in America as well, it's seen as a joke. Like if you wear a
Right.
mask, then you are overly protective of yourself. You're paranoid. You're a weirdo. Now we're forced to wear one, and if you don't wear one, you look like a weirdo. So I wanted to ask you, why vulnerable communities? How did you get into that line of work?
Hmm. So, so it's interesting because I've always been fascinated by groups in general, right? All kinds of groups, and I've always been very interested in understanding how our perception of individuals is influenced by the groups that individuals are part of, whether those are groups that we've decided to be part of or groups that we are part of because we were born in that community or because of X amount of reasons. So I've always been in this kind of constant search to try to understand
Mm,
what is it that defines these identities and our perception of individuals.
mm,
And I think it just came in a natural way that then, of course, vulnerable communities. I mean, what defines a vulnerable community is either the place in their life where the individuals that are part of a community find themselves in for any amount of reasons that make them vulnerable, right?
mm,
But usually there's something that unites the individuals, and in that case is that vulnerability. But there are so many different things about each individual, and that speaks is true to any group, right? In
mm-hmm,
any group, there's one or two things that the group participants or the group members have in common, but then there's so many different things that make them unique, and those
mm-hmm,
are the things that
mm-hmm,
I always study. Vulnerable communities, I'm interested in precisely in working with these communities in trying to give the individuals that are part of this group their own voice, to bring
mm-hmm,
their individuality back to life so that each individual can try and get out of the stigma that defines them as vulnerable. And then through art, they can find their own voice, they can find their own, they can push their confidence and their self esteem by feeling like, sure, they might be whatever label classifies them as a vulnerable person in that community, but they
mm.
also are many other things as individuals, as human beings.
Ah, that's beautiful because I love that how you see the inner story in everyone and how they deserve to have their story told and to express themselves and heal through art. I believe the same way with filmmaking. My purpose and my mission is to really bring that to the Philippines. I'm Filipino. I was born in the Philippines, and I feel like there's a lot of stories to be told, but a lot of stories are being hindered or blocked in the Philippines right now. And also education. People are not having the education to create stories and films and videos or the resources for the same for expressing themselves. And I believe that there are so many beautiful stories to be told and around the world through filmmaking, through photography, through art, through writing and music, and that some people in disenfranchised communities or in poverty, they don't have the resources, the education, the people to teach them, and also ways to publish it online because they don't have internet. And so I love that you're providing that for people. And for you, why was it photography? Why is your medium photography? Tell me about your story in photography.
Right. That's a great question because is kind of like one of those things. I mean, photography had always been a passion that I had. My dad loves photography, and I always grew up looking at his pictures and spending lots of hours just enjoying photography. So I always loved photography and embraced it in that way, but as an amateur, as a hobby. Um, because I was so interested in groups, I thought that theater was my call. And so I went to I was studying theater when I was in high school. I spent lots of hours studying theater and thinking that was kind of going to be my path. And I was interested in that kind of like the dynamics between the group identity and the individual identity and the performance, where it starts and ends. However, when I decided that it was time for me to go to university, that I wanted to go to university, I realized that I was more interested in going to a more in-depth academic study of that. And so I decided to study sociology. And so photography was always on the side, as a hobby, but I never saw it as my main language during those times. And so I studied sociology, and I loved what I studied in sociology. Mind you, in Spain, sociology back then was also quite rare. Most people didn't even know what sociology was. So it was quite a relief when I went to the US and people said, "Oh, you studied sociology. Okay, great." And they knew what it was. In Spain, it was sociology. Wait, so what do you do? So it was a quite unique thing. And I really enjoyed it and I really loved it. But I realized that I was getting very frustrated with the language. The language that I was using was very detached from the communities that I wanted to spend time with. I felt like I was using a language that would only give me access to be part of a community that was very small, that was the academic community.
That's right.
And I felt that the work that I was making would never then speak to the individuals that I wanted to spend time with. So that's when I started working with a couple of professors that were very interested in visual sociology. And they said, "Well, why don't you start bringing your camera? You love photography. Why don't you start combining it?" And so I started doing that, and I just realized that that was my language, that was kind of like the marriage between sociology and theater, because it was much more performative. Photography allowed me to get back on stage, as to speak, to get really close to the communities that I wanted to spend time with, to break that barrier. And also it's a universal language. So it would allow me to speak to a much wider community and to connect with people from all over the world without having to use a specific language that was either very technical or was just incomprehensible to other people.
That's so awesome to hear, because I do feel that photography does that. You capture a piece of life, a moment in time that really speaks about how that person was feeling, what they were doing that day. And do you have a moment in your life that you remember really inspired you with photography? Was there a moment where you were in part of a community and you took that one amazing photo, or a time when you were young and your dad, took a photo of you? Like, what was that moment in life where you were, I guess, connected with photography the most?
It's such a good question. It's so difficult to answer.
Yeah,
Let
sorry,
me
it's a
see.
deep question. It's a deep one.
No, it's a really great one. I never actually thought about that. Um, Let me see. Give me a moment.
No, it's okay.
Because I think it's interesting, because I think it's a difficult question, because my relationship to photography has been changing throughout the years, right? Like when I was a kid, photography for me was like that thing that I did. I was the photographer of the group of friends. And the first memory that I have, the first intense memory, is I remember being on like a school trip, and I had taken all these pictures, and then one of the schoolboys that was with me lost my camera. And I remember that it was like so awful. I felt like I had lost my voice. So I guess that was unconsciously one of the first moments where I realized that was the way that I expressed myself. However, later on, like now, the relationship that I have with the camera has also been changing quite a bit recently, because I've started using it in a much more performative way and much more collaboratively with my subjects. So before I would do this kind of, I would take a more documentary approach, where I would try and portray what I'm seeing and the emotions that I want to evoke, but without trying to alter the scene much, just being a little bit more of a passive observant. However, with the last body of work that I developed, I started really pushing myself so that I would become also not part of the scene, but that I would collaborate with the sitters to try and change things around, to stage some of the photographs. So the camera became this kind of tool that I was sharing with the sitters, and then that I was moving between them and myself, etc.
Wow. And that's the conversation that I've had with photographers lately, to tell you the truth, is staging your subject
Hmm.
and creating a story around it. And you're coming it from a another point of view as a documentarian in a way of
Hmm.
capturing a slice of life.
Right.
And I remember talking with my friends. They have another podcast where they followed a lot of artists, and the idea of when you capture someone in a documentary, I would say point of view, you are still staging them in a way because you're capturing them with your
Right.
eye and capturing with your perspective. And the way that you interpret that is your interpretation rather than what really happened during that time. And so when you do stage people and you are using photography now differently, have you found a different reaction from your subjects? Do you like the reaction that you're getting now with a much more staged and directed process, or did you enjoy seeing that slice of life, random, authentic, spontaneous reaction?
So I do really enjoy the new process. I find that in my work, intimacy and trust are very important. I spend a lot of time with my subjects, and I just like portraying intimacy and trying to bring that and get the viewer closer and
Hmm.
to get that feeling. And so collaborating in that way, like staging and directing, at first I thought it was going to be very awkward and that it would feel very superficial, but actually it turned out to be the opposite. It
Mm.
allowed me to kind of express my own ideas and my own vision to my subjects in a much more direct way, rather than having them guessing how the image is going to come out and what I'm going
Mm.
to do and what I'm going to take. I was expressing it even before taking the image, what my intention was, what I wanted. And so directing and actually holding someone's hand and saying, put it here, move it there, and directing the gaze and everything. First of all, it slowed everything down, right? So I'm spending much more time in a much more intimate way. It's also much more tangible and physical. I'm actually, physically interacting with my subjects. And
Hmm.
then when doing that, more often than not, the sitter then says, "Oh, how did it come out? How, And then there's that interaction of me looking at the work, and then if it actually came out as I wanted it, or when I get it, then I get really excited, and that's something that I immediately share with the sitter because we've been talking about it, we've been discussing it, I've been sharing my ideas. So then it just broke kind of like many barriers where I did not feel like just this passive observant that is trying to
Hmm.
capture it from the outset, but actually is also performing and playing a different role, but a role together with the sitters.
Oh, it's awesome to hear. I had a conversation before with someone, finding freedom in constraint and giving someone or yourself parameters to work with actually gives
Mhm.
you freedom because it actually gives you the space and knowing the rules gives you freedom to play with those rules and to play with those constraints. And when you are directing your subjects and getting into to your photography process, how do you get into your creative flow? Like, what is your creative process?
So usually, I mean, the thing that for me is the most important is spending time with my
Hmm.
subjects. I get inspiration most times from being there and from the things and the interactions and the gestures and the dynamics, the group dynamics. However, for example, it depends on the body of work that I'm working on. But recently, I've been working on projects where I spend months without being able to get together with the group, and so I spent a lot of time in my studio, and that forced me to have to change where I get my inspiration, because I couldn't just spend 2 months waiting until I was there, and then the pressure of what if I don't get inspired when I'm there, right? So I had
Hmm.
to change the process around, and I've always been quite research based, where I spend a lot of time doing research. But now I'm also doing research a lot for inspiration, where I'm spending a lot of time looking at references that inspire me, whether that's in literature or in paintings or in
Hmm.
films. Usually, those are the places where I get most of my references and my inspiration. Where I'm spending a lot of time looking at these things and embedding myself in that, and then making certain drawings or sketches of things that I think I'm gonna want to do, and then that kind of like keeps me going and keeps me inspired.
Hmm.
And then when I'm there, of course, then I know it's gonna be easier because I'm gonna, I have all that just in case I don't get inspired and I get, I suddenly have one of those days. But usually then it flows much easier because I have something that I can look back at that
Yeah,
that has been inspiring me for months.
that's great. So basically, when you prepare yourself enough, when you get on set and you hit that quote unquote creative rut, at
Mhm.
least you've had the months or weeks beforehand of inspiration to play on and to pick
Right.
from. And it's
Yeah,
great
exactly.
because it's cool that you actually find inspiration in literature and films as well. Are there any books or films you've been watching that inspired you lately?
So Sofia Coppola has been inspiring me a lot
Yes.
lately. So definitely, she's definitely someone that I keep going back for inspiration. I
Hmm.
think her visual language is a language that really resonates with my own language,
Hmm.
and so that's definitely one of the influences. With the last body of work that I did, I spent a lot of time looking at 19th century paintings because that was kind of like the references, the icons that were influencing the subjects that I was spending time with. So that kind
Mm.
of influenced my own process. And then in terms of literature, there's a writer, Junot Diaz, an American writer, Dominican American writer.
Okay.
Um, and his books also are great inspiration. It's a lot about multicultural and different dynamics and identity. So yeah, it's really varied. And I get a lot of influence from music, or not influence, but inspiration and energy to be like, okay, great, I should be producing work. Look at all the amazing people producing amazing work. I think music is the most direct um, source of energy for me.
Oh, I agree with you. Do you have a type of music you play on set when you are with your subjects, or do you keep it nice and quiet?
With my subjects, I'm nice and quiet. I
Okay.
usually whatever their music is. I'm lucky that now the body of work that I'm working on now, there's a lot of music involved because the
Mm,
subjects themselves, they are constantly surrounded by music, which I absolutely love. So it makes it
nice.
easier for me to get on that creative flow.
Oh, that's great. And it's cool to hear that you come from an academic background and also a creative background. And why do you feel it's important? Why is creativity important in the academic world as well as in sociology? Why is it important for creativity to be valued in the world today?
I think it's just so useful in any field or any in anything. Actually,
Mm,
creativity is, it's not just the field. It's a way of living, right? It's a way of surviving. I think it's so relevant for moments like right now where we,
mhm.
creativity is what can really help our mental health in finding different solutions, in thinking outside the box and really trying to find positivity and to see light where we just see darkness. So I think
Mm,
creativity is important in every field because it can push people to look at something from a different perspective, which
yeah.
I think is valuable. Even if at the end you're going to go back to the original perspective, at least you will have seen it. It's like if you were able to go to the other building and see your life from the neighbor's perspective. Even if you decide, I want to go back to my own life, it's
Yeah.
great to be able to see it from a different perspective to get some distance. And I think creativity does that, right? It gives us different perspectives to look through, and I think that's really enriching.
Oh, that's great. That's really good to hear. And I think it really does play a huge role in society today, especially today with, COVID-19 and the lockdowns and shelters in place. There's a moment in time where you're at home. You can either surround yourself with negative news or create something. You can either produce or consume. And I think that creativity, you're able to come up with innovative ideas that could change the world. If anything, change your own life or change someone else's life. And for you, with your work, are there any current topics or communities you're working right now that you're passionate about, or a certain message you want to get out there with your photography?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm still exploring the same things that have been driving my work since I started, which is this desire that I believe we all have to belong, to be part of something that's
Yes.
greater than ourselves, and that's really what I'm fascinated in trying to understand and trying to just to portray my work. So right now I'm spending a lot of time with individuals that are trying to seek that that understanding and that sense of belonging
Mm.
by joining groups that are seeking answers in nature.
Mm.
So I'm very interested in how there's this reemergence of pagan rituals and of groups that try and find a common sense of understanding of each other, a tangible way of connecting, and a balance with the natural world.
Wow. Have you seen the movie Midsummer yet?
No, not yet, and I'm not sure if I want to see it.
It's a creepy movie, but it's a awesome study and look into Norwegian and
Right.
Scandinavian folklore and history and mythology. But there's just some very interesting scenes in there. But I wanted to ask you that whole idea of paganism and reconnecting with nature. Um, what would be your, I guess, your advice for a lot of people who are stuck indoors right now? Because we are disconnected in nature right now. I mean, we can't go to national parks. I don't know about you, but in California, we can't go to
Yeah.
the beach. I try to go to the beach on Sunday. Everything's closed. I can't go to a national park, and we're stuck at home or we walk around the block. And so, what have you found in your studies, the connection between humans and nature and the importance of that?
Well, I mean, I think it's crucial, right? I mean, we are natural beings, so we do need to connect with nature and to connect with nature in a much more tangible way. And I think it's so
Mhm.
hard now, of course, because we're locked in concrete walls, and that makes it really difficult. My advice in connecting with nature, I would say try and connect in any creative way that you can think of. Of course, a simple way, if you can, if you're in a country that you can go and go to a park and and try and spend a little bit of time looking at nature rather than a screen. However, if you're stuck at home and you really can't do that for whichever reason, be creative. If you don't have plants at home, well, you should try and have plants at home. But if you
Yes.
don't have plants at home, um, well, then try and look at plants, images of plants, and if you have printer, print out some images and then make a collage, and then try and make a sculpture of it. But it's bringing our conversation back to what we were saying before. Be creative, even if you think you're not creative, even if you think you're terrible at drawing. Just get a green pencil and try and draw a plant. See what happens. If it's terrible, cut it out and then try and put it somewhere where you can make a sculpture out of it. And if it's still bad, then make a little hole and then shine a light through it and then see what
Yes.
happens. Take a photograph of it. So just do it. And by doing it, you'll probably feel much more connected. You'll probably start feeling that you're actually not as bad as you thought, and that you can come up with some things. And I can guarantee you it'll make you feel so much better than just sitting in front of a screen watching amazing things that other people have produced. I mean, that's great, but produce something yourself. I think that will give you a sense of accomplishment, and it'll inspire you.
Oh, it's so good to hear. And that's brilliant, by the way. That's an amazing idea. I think you need to sell that. I think people need to sign up and create um, self-made pictures of plants and put it up because I think
Yeah.
that's a really cool idea. And you really brought up a lot of really good topics I can talk about because I love creativity and this idea of it. And I spoke to a music futurist a couple months ago, and how in the future, and it's funny, it's happening now. There's going to be two types of people when there's AI taking over a lot of jobs and there's content or things to be created. There's either going to be the consumer or there's going to be the creator. And there's going to be a lot of value in the creators, but also the creators are going to find their creations only consumed by the consumer. And you either are the person who creates these ideas, creates these products, creates this content, or you're the one who consumes it. And now, because we're forced indoors, I've seen it. We're in a situation right now. You either consume the news, consume live streams, consume TV, or you create. You put out music, you create a live stream, you put out an ebook, you create a new business. And it's really, I would say, magnified a lot of people's intentions and their purposes and their goals and their dreams and who they truly are. And it's the idea of like, what are you going to do at this point? What is the next step for your life? And so, with your, I would say, passion to study the idea of belonging and why do people want to belong? How has this COVID-19 and um, global lockdown influenced your current research? And what are your thoughts on human belonging now? And how have we been transitioning in this digital age?
Oh, such a good question again, and difficult one.
Yeah.
Um, I think the whole situation hopefully will help many people really think of their priorities, and I
Yes.
think that will definitely help with understanding their sense of belonging, or what they're trying to seek, or why are they doing certain things and other things. But I think many of the frustrations that people have many times are because of this tension between what they really want and what they're doing, right, and what they
Mm,
think they want. And I think it's a really important time right now to use to kind of like to reflect on what are our priorities, what are the things that we like to spend time with, and really, if you can, to spend time trying to have that time to think and to revalue the structure of your own life and of how you spend your time, whether it's consuming or creating or doing a little bit of both, which is fine. But then what makes you happy, really? And I think
mm,
that will lead you to what makes you feel like you belong. Because I mean, belonging is really just what makes you feel like you have a place in the world or a voice, right?
mm.
That's what
That's right.
really will make you feel like you belong to this world. So I think it's a great, yeah, it's going to be an interesting time to see how it changes people, how it changes the world or our societies, hopefully for the best. But I think it's going to be a very interesting time for many people to have these introspective, hopefully, conversations with themselves where they really try and focus on what's important and what allows them to develop their own identity in a way that makes them feel happy.
That's right. And then for you with your photography, now that you've had a few projects, just postponed, I want to say
Mhm.
canceled because they'll come back. How are you creating at home? I mean, it's strange for me. I mean, I have a camera, and I can only film my couch in my kitchen so much. So, so I, what are you doing? How are you keeping creative?
So it's interesting because okay, I'm doing it in different ways. One thing that I'm doing is I'm working on a photo book, which is a challenge that I've been wanting to take for a couple of years now. It's something
Nice.
that I've been wanting to do, but it's something that I've never done before. So
Mhm.
it's very new to me. And so I'm spending a lot of time because also I'm combining photography and text, which is also very new for me. So it's interesting because I'm spending a lot of time kind of like using photography in a very tangible way. So printing out little images and then putting them on the floor and just like filling my living room with different layouts for a book and thinking
Mm,
about that. And so that's been really fun. And to me, it's quite challenging because it's a very different way of working. I work with my work usually the way that I show it or share it is usually with exhibitions. And so
hmm.
it's a very different way to suddenly work in a small format where I'm combining text and there has to be some sequence. So that has been very interesting. But I felt like, after all, I mean, that is, of course, creative and I'm creating new work. But photographically, I'm not making new photographs, right? I'm using the ones that I already had. So I just felt like I wanted to make some new images. And I never photograph at home. And it was a big challenge. So I thought, okay, maybe I should try and see what happens. And so I went around the house. I just moved to a new flat. So it's just full of boxes and they were driving me crazy. But then I realized that there was this beautiful light coming from outside. I live in London where it's not
Mhm.
sunny like in LA. And it's surprisingly been incredibly sunny for the last couple of weeks.
Oh,
And
that's
there's
good.
this beautiful sunlight coming through the window, and many people are kind of very frustrated about that because they think, oh, we're confined and then it's sunny. But I actually think, I mean, it's great. It would be even worse if it's just raining. So
Yes.
I started looking at this light, and then I started creating this photographic series where I just got the objects that are really just keeping me company these days. Basic objects,
Oh,
from my
wow.
headphones to my glass of water to toilet paper to soap. Basic objects. and trying to really bring some positivity to it. So I really wanted to make a photographic series that was beautiful, that visually brought people some peace and inspiration. And so I used this beautiful light that came through the window and tried to play with sensuality and gesture and really try and make this photographic series. I'll share it with you.
Oh, please, that's outstanding. That's such a brilliant idea. That's an outstanding idea.
It's been fun. It's been really great. Yeah.
Just taking everyday items and using the current light and natural light that you have to bring them out in full light. And it's what people use every single day. Headphones, toilet paper, a phone.
Yeah, exactly.
It's outstanding. Oh, I can't wait to see that. Please share it. I think everyone out here would love to see that. But Alejandra, thank you so much for this great conversation today. I mean, I want to acknowledge you for the work that you're doing to really tell people's voices and vulnerable communities, and also just people in general. I think that the idea of belonging is huge right now. I think that it's really created this idea that, being digital, being isolated, the digital connections that we're having right now, even though it's digital, it's a connection. And I think that your work is going to be speaking for generations. I mean, the photography you already have right now is outstanding. Like I said, you're saving face, and the stuff you did in Japan. It's beautiful. And so I love just watching your work and watching you grow. And I can't wait to see all the new photography of your house in your boxes.
Exactly.
But
thank you so much. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. It's been really great fun. And as you said, it's really wonderful to be able to connect, even though we're all confined in our homes. But it creates these new opportunities to connect with people from different places in the world. So
yeah,
thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. And I just can't believe that, you're in London, I'm in LA, and it's just, we're still experiencing the same creative struggles, but also inspirations.
Yeah, exactly.
So before, we go, can you let us know where to find you and how we can support?
That'd be great. You mean like
your website, your
website? Yeah, absolutely. So my website is www.alejandra. So it's ALEJANDRACTR.com. That's where you'll find my work, an explanation of my work, exhibitions, etc. And then on Alejandra CTR on Instagram, again, ALEJANDRA CTR. That's where I usually post more day-to-day stuff. I've posted some of the photographs of the new series that I've done that I'll share with you. And any updates on exhibitions, on print sales, things like that, I always post on Instagram.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias, Alejandra.
Thank you so much. Gracias a ti.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see the toilet paper series coming out soon.
Great. I'll send it.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Stay safe.
You too. Thank you for listening to the Creative Haven podcast. And if you dig it and like what you heard today, please give us a nice review and rating and share it with one of your friends that you think needs some creative inspiration. You can always find more content and resources at thecreativehaven.com and hit me up on Instagram at Mitchel Dumlao. And if you want to reach out, collab, or ask any questions, you have my permission to slide into my DMs. So keep positive, continue to learn and hone your craft, and create all day. Salamat.